Hello and welcome to this webinar on emerging careers in startup. Of course, we all know that startups have been a very interesting proposition for quite a few of us who are actually looking at career options, and also people who are following news would know that the careers in startups have almost accelerated. And that acceleration is not only in terms of careers, but if you look at, for example, even the kind of way the sector has been growing, it is phenomenal. For example, there is a report from US India Strategic and Partnership Forum, which suggests that in the next 5 years, India's tech sectors can attract more than $21 billion in investment. Not only that, it would also create almost 500,000 direct jobs and 1.4 million indirect jobs. Now, when you look at digital transformation at the center of its plan and the entire startup ecosystem, it also is very encouraging to see that government has also put something called Startup India, whose aim is to build a strong ecosystem for startups that boost economic growth and job creation. And interestingly, when you actually go to the Startup India site, you would find there are more than 41,000 startups recognized by them. And they have already given a funding of more than 4,500 crores to more than 375 startups. Now, when you look at some stats like this, you realize that in the last 1 year, despite the COVID, there were more than 14,000 startups that actually got created, which tells us that despite the failure rate of 90% that people talk about, there is enough excitement in the air about startups, and therefore there is no reason why we should not talk about it. And to look at what people can do in order for us to be able to make a career in startup, we have four eminent panelists. The first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Dhruvam Thakkar, who is a founder of Smart Taxi. Now, Dhruvam is a risk-taking and self-motivated individual who started his own business, which was a bootstrapped venture called the Smart Taxi. And interestingly, this venture does not aim to become the largest taxi service in India, but it wants to become India's ranked #1 cab service in terms of customer satisfaction. In fact, Dhruvam, along with a degree in business administration and skills which he learned during his education and his professional experience, allowed him to start this startup. He quit his job, he started doing market research to evaluate his idea, and he actually himself carried out a research which was about 10 questions, which was related to the question, to the concept of his cab, and he started with one cab based on the feedback that he got, and over a period of time, starting 2016 in Ahmedabad. Now today they have 920 cabs, and services are available across 42 cities in India, and they're expanding as we go along. In fact, Dhruvam's in areas of interest is not only startup and technology, but also training. And it'll be great to hear your views, Dhruvam, today. So if you can wave to the audience will know that I'm talking about you.
Hello. Thank you so much for such a brief introduction. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Dhruvam. The second panelist is Sapan, who is a co-founder of Monk at Work. And that is very interesting profile that you would find. Sapan actually comes with a rich experience in the field of leadership development, cultural transformation, and he has a long experience and study when you talk about this concept of mindfulness. In fact, Sapan's background in corporate strategy enables him to bring sharp focus on organizational priorities and clear business impact. Sapan, in terms of his industry experience, has worked in energy industry, which is renewable energy, and he also worked in US for a brief stint. Having worked with multiple people across different cultures and continents, he brings unique insights to the workplace behavior. In fact, Sapan is a certified master life coach, certified master practitioner in neuro-linguistic programming, and he is also certified in psychometric testing from SciTech UK. Sapan is also trained in Vipassana meditation, and he keenly studies Gnostic wisdom. And in fact, in terms of areas of interest, Sapan's areas are leadership, workplace behavior, and corporate strategies. So Sapan, welcome to this panel. And if you can just quickly say hi to the audience, then we will actually
introduce. Thanks so much, Pancham. Hello, everyone.
Thanks, Sapan. The next panelist is Smriti Tomar, who is founder and CEO of Stack Finance. In fact, as founder and CEO of Stack Finance, Smriti aims to make financial planning accessible and affordable for India's millennials to achieve financial security. And of course, I'm sure there'll be plenty of takers for that, given the fact that all of us want to make sure that we save enough for our retirements. In fact, prior to this venture, Smriti was a data analyst at EXL Services with emphasis on overseas finance and banking industry, particularly Citibank in Latin America. Before EXL, Smriti had worked at a SaaS-based B2B company, Appointee Software Incorporated. Smriti is devoted to 3 areas, which include marketing and product management, creating a venture that creates awareness, accessibility, and personalization around financial services, and women's business success. And areas that Smriti has interest in are investment and trading acumen, fintech, marketing, product management, public speaking, and content creation. Smriti, welcome to the panel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pancham, for the kind words. Glad to be here and looking forward to the session.
Sure. Thank you. And last but not the least, Vinay Matthews, who is founder and chief operating officer of Faircent. Now, Faircent is India's largest peer-to-peer lending platform, and Vinay has been instrumental in the company's growth since inception. Vinay is an expert with over 20 years of progressive experience in scaling up operations, delivering profitable growth, and especially in the internet businesses. Vinay has held leadership positions with several organizations like the Indian Express, Rediff, SIFI, and also Bennett & Coleman over the course of his career. Prior to founding Faircent, in fact, Vinay was working with timesjobs.com as the national head of sales and service delivery. And Vinay's area of interest happens to be leadership, how to scale up operations, and how do you grow profitably. So Vinay, welcome to the panel.
Thanks, Pancham. Thanks for having me.
Cool. Now, see, what we try and do is to make sure that the content is very suitable for the kind of audiences that we have. What I'm going to do is I'm going to invite the audience for a short poll, and I'm going to launch the poll. So that poll actually has 2 questions. The first question is about how many years of experience that you have. So audiences, if you can actually quickly answer, the poll will be here. So we will be able to see this. I think audiences are still putting in the responses. Once we have the responses, I'm sure we'll have that here. And I can see that people have already started putting their questions here. So we will try and see how best we can use as many questions as possible here. Interesting. So I'm going to close the poll. Let's see how the results look like. Somehow it's not coming here, which is a bit strange. Can anybody see the poll result?
Yep.
Okay, because somehow I can't, which is strange actually. I thought we could see the poll result.
So should I spell that out for you, Pancham? So we have majority of them, I think 50, close to 60% of them are 3+ years experience.
Yes, so majority of the people are 3+ experience. I can see it on the side, but I can't see it on the main screen, which is all right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the next poll, which will allow us to see a couple of, in fact, yeah, I've hidden the poll and now I can see everybody. So I'm going to look at the second poll, which will talk about what kind of functional experience that people have. So I've launched it. So audiences, if you can quickly help us know which functions you are from, so that will also enable us to have our questions right there. Okay, so I'm going to close the poll because it seems that we don't have any more responses coming in. And I'm going to share the poll results. So interestingly, 25% of the people are marketing and sales functions. Very few people from product and technology functions. 30% in HR, 15% in finance, and 25% in other functions. That is actually interesting. Okay, so the composition. Looking at the composition, are so panelists. I mean, you know, I'll start with Sapan, since you have done a lot of work in the area of workplace behaviors. So does this split in terms of functions appear slightly interesting and different to you, based on what, you know, normally you would expect product and technology people to come and talk in forums where we talk about startups?
I think that's true, Pancham, so much, because I think perceptionally I was also expecting possibly maybe like 50% would be from product technology, and then rest 50% would comprise others. But I realize it's a fallacy in our own mind as well, you know, as it is in people's mind. I think people keep talking about you know, startups being more about technology, but I think, you know, that is becoming more and more clear that technology is more an enabler. It's what we are trying to deliver. I mean, we may do it with technology or without technology. So the functions, the actual service and the other functions become equally important, and very happy to see that people from different functions are here, because again, it's this fallacy that only technology people would be interested or technology people would have opening in startups. It's a fallacy. And just to let me close my statement by saying this, that we have a few openings at this point of time and none of them are in technology at this point of time.
Interesting. Well, thanks, Sapan. So in fact, you know, so looking at people like Smriti and Vinay, so you were working in well-established corporate functions, and then you decided one fine day that, you know, you may want to just leave it all aside and start your startup. When you look back, and let's say tomorrow there is somebody who is wanting to come here and say, you know what, Vinay, you know what, Smriti, I want to join startup. So why would people want to join startup? So I'll start with Vinay and then I'll come to Smriti, and then we will start the thread of conversations.
Okay, so I think first we have to understand what startup means. Okay? A lot of people have this wrong notion about, you know, startups. Just because an organization is, you know, been there for some time does not mean that it's a non-startup or a, you know, organization. So basic fundamental definition of the startup is that if the revenue lines and the revenue models are not established as yet, okay, it'll be called a startup. And that's the reason I think Flipkart, even after 10-12 years, is still called a startup, because you don't know if you stop discounting the products. I'm just giving an example. You know, will the takeoff be as good as what it is right now? Yeah, so the predictability, the stability of the models is yet to be proven. That's the reason these are called startups. Okay? So if you're doing a job which is traditionally existing, okay, and you're trying to kind of rebuild that through technology, as Sapan said, you know, technology is an enabler. Okay? So you're not doing a startup work, you're doing a greenfield project or a greenfield work, but not necessarily all, you know, business that gets started is not necessarily be a startup, right? So startup definition is the business models are not established, and that's what the classical definition is, right? So the business model is not established, you know, you kind of, now with that background, okay, people who want to kind of, you know, I'm going to give, you know, give the rosy picture also, I'm going to give the, you know, bad picture also, okay? So it's important to kind of realize both sides, okay? So for a startup, talent is always a struggle, always, okay? I cannot believe a single guy getting the people on time, good set of people. It's always been a struggle. And the reason for that struggle is because, you know, we are not a brand as yet, right? And people don't work for brand. And the reason, there's another interesting reason, okay? People want to kind of go to startup primarily because of some, you know, solid reason, okay? Now, if that solid reason is missing, okay, or that belief system is missing, and let's call this belief system, you know, let's say they are going to kind of change the world. Okay, let's say that's the belief system, right? So if you have that ability of going and changing the world, okay, then you should go and join a startup. Okay, if you don't have that in you, then you're better off not to join a startup. Okay? Because what happens is that in a startup, you may not get the money. People talk about startup pay more. No, they don't pay more. You got it all wrong. Okay, startups don't pay more. They kind of pay less and make you work harder. Okay, so the people who get paid more are the ones who do kick-ass work, who are wanting to change the world. Otherwise, very few of them kind of. So it's important to understand this. A whole lot of people don't believe in themselves. Okay. That they can change the world, and that's the reason they don't join a startup. Okay, not because the startup will not last. People comprehend that, saying that startup will not last, let's kind of stay in an organization which is more bigger, stable brand, all of that. They don't believe in themselves that they can change it, and that's the reason they kind of don't take leap of faith. Okay? So it's important to kind of realize that piece before you kind of even get into kind of addressing the startup. So that's one of the message that I want to give the audience.
No, I'm glad that you talked about it, Vinay. Actually, what you gave is very interesting. So basically, what you're saying is why people should join startup is not for money, not for maybe a huge acceleration, but for the conviction that they can do something which will change the lives of many people.
Yes. Yes.
Great.
So
thank you.
With that background, is linked everything. Everything is linked with that particular background. So all of that. Oh yeah. All of that comes is from there only.
Well, thank you, Vinay. So Smriti, of course, now, because I said at the beginning that maybe I'll throw the similar question to you, but given what Vinay talked about, that people should come and join a startup when they believe they can change something. So in your experience, is there anything else that you have seen people being motivated by when they want to join a startup? Because you would have done a lot of hiring for your business.
Yeah. So I absolutely agree. I mean, startups have pros and cons, and as Vinay sir mentioned here, I mean, I think startups give you two things. One is that they give you an immense opportunity to explore and grow personally. I mean, even when we hire, I mean, it's not that we're looking for a certain skill set and asking people to only concise themselves to that particular area of job. Everybody is kind of experimenting. Somebody had said that every entrepreneur in a startup is actually a scientist, because everybody is exploring new things and experimenting with new things, and so are the employees too, because it's a small organization. As he mentioned, I mean, not just the revenue model. In fact, a lot of things are actually planned on the go. So you have to be very flexible. You have to be very much agile. And so you have the freedom to kind of choose whatever you want to do, whatever you want to work on, and also explore new things to learn and grow in. But at the same time, with this power, with this freedom, come responsibilities too. So the responsibility here is that for you to take initiatives. I mean, as an entrepreneur, I always like my team to be always on the go. I mean, I should not be the one telling them that, this is your task and this is how you should break it down and this is what your deliverables are. No, I guess in every startup, you need people who are smart enough to, take their own initiatives, complete their own work and do it their own way. Ultimately, what you need are results. So I think those are the kind of responsibilities you expect. Responsibilities in terms of also the risk-taking appetite. I mean, startups are not, they're basically not, a rainbow where you can, kind of just grow all together and never see a downhill. You have to be always ready for a risk and a failure. So those are, I think, probably, the responsibilities that are expected out of you in a startup.
So interesting thing that you added, Smriti, it's to what Vinay said. So Vinay talked about the fact that do I have the conviction that I want to make a difference and I can do it, number one. You added to that saying that, that conviction itself is not enough. But do I have the conviction on act on that conviction? That is the next second piece that you actually added. And the third piece is that when you start working, do you keep waiting for directions or are you a self-starter? So some of these pieces that you have built now prompt me to come to Dhruvam actually, because so now we have built at least 3 broad layers. One, of course, I want, do I believe in myself? Do I want to do something good? Second, can I act on that belief? And third, can I do multiple things without maybe bothering about structure or somebody supervising me? So in your setup, in the last 4 years that you have started your business, where have you seen maximum success coming from out of these characteristics that people have spoken about?
Yeah, I've generally seen, first of all, whatever the reviews been given by Sapan, Vinay, and Smriti. My views are also, similar kind of that, because we all from a startup. Of course, the domains are different, but for 1.5 years, actually, we were not having any team. So I just driven everything by myself. At least for first 1 year, people were not ready to join the organization by the name of the startup, because we were absolutely new and there were multiple competitions. So Vinay has rightly pointed out that, until and unless you are not very clear in your mind, the startup is not something which you should go for. So you have to, broaden yourself, you have to make yourself broaden, and then you have to accept the multiple responsibilities, multiple tasks will come up. To add what Shruti said, that every time we cannot wait as a startup, because we are probably the smallest team in the entire panelist what we have right now. We hardly have a member of 7 total in our team, and we manage entire operation with it. So you can definitely understand that there are multiple roles which is being played by an individual, and we can't keep on waiting for the directions to come, and we have to act on it. So whenever we feel that the things which are a necessity for either customer centric, or maybe to delight a customer, or maybe it is a beneficial for a company, individual must have that courage to go for that decision. And then whatever things happen, and as a leader, or maybe as an atmosphere of an organization, it is most important for an individual that you need to provide the atmosphere to an individual, so that whatever ideas comes out, even though if it failed, then also you need to accept it, make a corrections, and then further. So that is how the teams get motivated. That is how teams get developed in the startup, and this is how the startup scenarios are working as of now. So this is what my view to Harsh, or to your question. Sorry.
No, in fact, Dhruvam, you talked about something very interesting when you talked about the fact that you in startups you have to be prepared for maybe extended period where you know that your business model has not yet worked. So you continue to tweak and hope that things, something or the other clicks, and people cannot give up. People have to be resilient, which is the other dimension that you have added actually, which is very important. And the other thing that you also talked about, which Vinay was also talking about, is the fact that it is a myth that startups will offer a lot of amazing benefits, because when you start, you are bootstrapped. The fact is you start for cash, so you would want people to earn less and work more. And now, so putting all these 4 or 5 components together, Sapan, now I come back to you. So you dispel the myth that it is only product and technology people who normally, which is common wisdom, that are people attracted to startups. Given all this, now who are the people who if for example Vinay, Smriti, or Dhruvam, they have to hire somebody, what are some of the things they have to start looking at resumes, and during the conversations that they have to evaluate, so that they know that this person actually is good fit for a startup? The reason I'm asking this is because there are a lot of people who have asked this question. I am a mid-level manager, for example. Said somebody has asked. Actually, there is a gentleman called Ashok Sejwal. So he has asked this question. He's a mid-level manager, but he wants to go to a startup, but he's not sure what can he do for startups to accept him, because in his mind they always hire young people. So nice. what can someone like Ashok do to make it to a startup?
Okay, so let me answer Ashok and possibly some more people through that. I think what Vinay, Dhruvam, and Smriti spoke about, and if we can summarize, and let me not share it from their angle, let me share it from the angle of, let us say, Ashok. If they have to decide to enter into a startup, what they should think. So I think, actually speaking, there is a very, very clear objective way to do it. So you have, 3 aspects: structure, steadiness, and safety. Okay. Keep it on one side of the curve, and keep the growth, learning, and challenges on the other. And now, just in your own mind, think which you are really concerned about, which you really value. What is it that you value? I'm sure you value all these 6. There is no doubt about it. 3 on one side and 3 on other side. There is no doubt about it. but what will you compromise for the sake of other is an important question for you. If you have a lot of yearning that yes, growth, learning and challenges are something which excite me, and I can take that risk, you may have the profile of joining a startup. And as when I was mentioning, are you coming to change the world? That might sound a big statement, but actually speaking, if you have that spark internally where you are driven by the challenges, if you're driven by the learning, if you're driven by the growth, then believe me, the safety, the steadiness, the structure which you would get in the established companies, okay, may not matter. But if you are very clear that steadiness, structure and safety needs are extremely high for me, then definitely don't look for the startups.
Understood. Well, thanks a lot, Sapan. So I hope, Ashok, you've got your answer. In fact, a similar question was asked by Satish also, because Satish said that he was working with MNCs and now he wants to move to startups. So kindly suggest few ideas on how I can apply for jobs in startups. So I think Sapan's answers would have actually helped you. You have to decide what is priority for you. That's what Sapan is saying. And then, of course, you have to make an effort towards that. Now, what we see linked to this, now, see, we have now established what is it that startups need. We have also established to some extent what can people do to think of a career in startups. Now, if Vinay, I'm to ask you, so you would have seen many people, you would have also seen stories of many startups. If you were to outline biggest career derailers in startups, what would these be? For example, person working in a startup, what would derail his or her career?
So before that, let me just touch upon the previous question by Ashok. Okay, so it's not about that. There are certain specific skill sets the startups are looking for. Okay, and of course there are. There are people with skill sets. We kind of all organizations look at. So we also look at skill sets, right? So there's nothing different there. Okay, but what is different, I tell you. Okay, so one, we need very rounded people. And why do we need rounded people? Is because organization would expect you to pick up and run with things which otherwise you would have not ran in the past, right? So we need rounded people. So aaj ye kar rahe ho to kal aapko wo karna padega. So it's a little, it's not like you put on blinkers and you're supposed to do a particular job. So we need rounded people. Okay, we need people who can take things to logical conclusion and make it big. Okay? Not just conclude it, but try to make it big. Okay, small things. How can you make it big? Simple things like, just doing a process change. How can you kind of tom-tom about it? Let the entire organization know, and try to kind of make it big. So and take it to a logical conclusion. So we need people who can, do a closure. It's very, very important because people aren't going to chase you. Okay, nobody's going to come and tell you. You got to be self-driven. So that's the important point. The other thing is that genuinely, if you ask me, people, as I talked about earlier, startups will not change your world. Believe me, they'll not change your world. So it has to be within you to kind of change it. So there are a lot of people who value money a lot. Okay, so that's a very clear indication for a startup. So if you value money more than the ESOPs, chances are that you'll not survive more than maybe a couple of years in a startup, because the work culture is completely different. It's completely unstructured. It's not like a large organization that you kind of one piece of work that you're doing. It's completely chaotic. Okay? So it's very, very difficult. Now talking about the derailers. Okay, so I think important to understand the derailer is because at the end of the day, when you're getting into something, you have to kind of make sure that you're going to the right organization or whatever. So one of the biggest derailers that I've seen in the last 6-7 years of my startup experience is that people who come from larger organization thinking like one. Please don't think like that. Just because you come from a large organization, your word is the gospel is not going to happen, right? You need to kind of set yourself with the environment which you're working with and work within that environment, okay? Because you're not going to get fancy tissue papers in the toilets. Okay? So it's going to be very, very tough. So coming from larger organization, people have this huge issue with respect to adjusting within a startup. Okay, so that is one. Okay. Second is that there is a lot of resistance amongst people to take roles which are typically not, marked by them. All this while they were working in an organizations, they were doing, let's say, a marketing role. Maybe within marketing, they were doing, let's say, brand management, and suddenly you've been asked to kind of do sales. Right? You work in a startup. If you have resistance there, It's not going to be good. So you should be open to kind of picking up any kind of job to kind of work in a startup, right? The other thing is that if you can't move fast, okay, when I say move fast, startup pace is very fast because you're young, you're very vibrant, you kind of pace out very fast, and this can irritate a lot of people, okay? And it irritates primarily because the founders could be completely irrational. They might have a very extended, large discussion today, and the guy will start to go to work, and tomorrow will come and change it. Okay, so it's a change which happens every day. I would say every hour. It's that kind of change. A lot of people are not used to that kind of change, right? Because they work in a certain environment, which they are supposed to do a certain kind of task, and they've been doing this for a very long time, and suddenly a change disrupts them. Okay, so they're not used to that. So you have to be used to that. Only then you shouldn't look at kind of the complete derailers otherwise. Okay. The other thing is that when I talked about completely unstructured environment, it's primarily because the revenue lines are not very clear, right? Revenue models are not clear. And that's the reason I think the complete unstructured environment works. Okay? Because this is not working, something else has to work. If this is not working, there's another 2-3 things that we try to kind of make it work. The idea is to kind of make things work for the revenue models to get established. So yeah, so I think according to me, these are some of the few derailers. But if you look at it from a qualitative point of view, I think there are only 3 very, very important quality that is required. Top 3 qualities, if I may call it. So I think number 1 is integrity, okay? The honesty, the commitment of work, and all that. You need to kind of be honest with your work. Intelligence, and intelligence is not that you have to be from IIM or from IIT. Intelligence means you have to be a creative person. You should have common sense. Okay, people who can apply themselves. Yeah. And lastly, you should be energetic, passionate. You should be self-driven. Nobody's going to come in, tell you or teach you, to do things. So these are 3 things I think is very important to kind of get yourself going in a startup.
So Vinay, you actually talked about something interesting. So one is, of course, people who come from structured organizations, people who are not able to make the transition, people who do not understand the context very quickly. So those are the people who will not be able to do well.
And that is the reason you see most of the startups having young kids. That is the reason. Okay, you will not have 30+ guys, a lot of them floating around, primarily because they're not used to the change.
Understood. Which makes a lot of sense actually, given how the context is different. The second thing that you also talked about actually is that people who can't see through a work, they will always struggle, because the expectation is that you run with it and you actually hit the goalpost.
Yeah.
Which is very actually interesting. So now actually I will loop back to Smriti. So Smriti, in your experience, what is given the context that we have talked about as to what works and who will not work, what is the most unusual hiring that you would have done, and why did you make that choice?
Sorry, unuseful hiring.
Unusual. This is
unusual.
fairly useful, I would imagine, but unusual. Yeah.
All right. So I think the most unusual hiring that we have done so far is yeah. So I think recently, even after COVID, a lot of people, since they were losing jobs or their pay cuts, they had their pay cuts or something, people relied on alternate sources of income, and hence the whole side hustle thing, or the gig that people want to do, it kind of became the buzzword. So there were a lot of freelancers, a lot of people who have well-settled jobs in probably even MNCs and big corporations, but they wanted to do something new and explore something new. So I think, I think we have had a couple of unusual hirings during this pandemic time. One of them was definitely this freelancing, not exactly freelancing, but the person was totally into a different job and he was doing designing work for us. So that was one. And second is, I think, I think we hired a designer who was based out of Europe, and that was quite unusual because I think that this is one thing that I faced a lot. I mean, in India, when we look out for people who have out of the box thinking, because design is all about being creative, being thinking something different, and because a product is aligned for millennials, we need something which is extremely unusual, extremely attractive, and so we could not really find somebody who could think out of the box. And we hired a student actually who was based out of Europe, and he was a fresher, not really very experienced, but really good at work. So I think that is the second one, and probably I guess the learning was that experience does not always matter. You get people who might not be that experienced, and get people from places where you did not even expect from. And second is that you should not restrict yourself, as I think Vanessa also mentioned, that you have to go out of your comfort zone. Somebody is just maybe a developer does not mean that he cannot kind of start something else tomorrow, cannot get into something else, probably designing or I don't know, whatever. So yeah, I think those were two hirings that we did, which were totally unexpected.
So in fact, what you talked about, Smriti, thank you for talking about some of these things, because what you talked about also gives us a very interesting insight that most of the people now going forward, also with the advent of gig economy and with the fact that I don't know which of my skills can be monetized.
Yeah.
And the second fact, club it with the fact that workplace stress and then people's quest for meaning in the workplace has led them to now start pursuing passions outside of work, and some of them can actually make a career out of it, an alternative career out of it. So yes, absolutely, and we have seen many people doing something like that, which I'm sure as we go along will continue to increase. So Dhruvam, there is a related question to you, but it is not about finding a job. So there is a gentleman who wants to open a school. So he says that I want to start this business of my own, I want to open a school. So what advice can you give him? This is your experience as an entrepreneur who started, who saw difficulty, and who grew your business.
Always, whenever whatever the thoughts he carry in his mind, I must congratulate to that individual that he wanted to give it back something to the society by opening up the school. Maybe on a longer perspective, maybe right now education is considered as a business, but what I as an individual always think that it is something which we generally give it back to the society. We nurture the students, we nurture our future generations, so that it can give something good results to our nation. School, opening a school, first of all, that generally what people, they make a mistake whenever they wanted to jump to a business, that they wanted to see started growing or coming revenues and profits from day one, which is genuinely not possible in any of the scenarios. Being it whether you are a bootstrap startup, there are funded startups as well, there are bootstrap startup as well. Bootstraps, of course, they have very tougher days to pass on compared to the funded one, because they have very limited budgets, limited resources. So in that case, you just have to keep your vision and your goals very clear, that what you wanted to deliver to your customers. In that case, your students or maybe the parents, those who are the customers in the school case. So you wanted to fix to that, you wanted to stick to that despite of n number of resistance comes on your way. You need to define your path and you need to continue towards it, rather than keep on changing it, because there might be a situations where you may come across something different difficulties which you might have not thought of, and then if you change your plans, then that won't work. So you need to continue moving in the same direction. That is the first point. Secondly, you need to definitely, being a school, you are not going to handle it alone, so you need to have a team with you. Those who are recruited, or whomsoever you are recruiting, you always make sure that they are aligned with your vision, because that is where most of the teams, they find a mismatches, and that is where entire organizations or startup gets collapsed. So whosoever are joining with you into this mission, they have to make themselves aligned to the vision, and it is a responsibility of a leader for you, that you need to pick up the right guys for your organizations, those who are absolutely aligned to the vision. Okay, and third and the most important thing is, whatever you are expending, means whatever the expenses are happening in your initial days, or maybe at the growth stage, keep a very sharp eye onto that, because that expenses plays a very great role into survival of a startup or a business. So if these three, if you are able to maintain it well, you are definitely able to jump into the whatever business, maybe it is a schooling, maybe it is a music teaching, or maybe it is a dance, or whatever it is definitely going to get succeed. But you always need to have a perseverance, and you need to have patience into you. So these are the things what I would like to say in response to the question.
Well, Dhruvam, thanks a lot. So I hope, Chandan, you've got your answer. So first, of course, you need to be very clear about why you want to do this business, number one. Second, whatever your reasons are, they have to be noble reasons. It cannot be about making money, because that is not what education is about. And third, of course, you have to get people who align with your vision, and you have to have almost tunnel vision in this aspect. If 10 people tell you you can't do it, don't listen to them. And get people who you believe will share your values. And last but not the least, keep a very strong tab on expenses, because every rupee counts. So if you can keep this in mind, and we hope that you open a great school, and maybe tomorrow we'll invite you over to speak about how you got inspired by a webinar here, and had a very successful journey. So on that note, I will now direct a question to Sapan now. So Sapan, of course, so now we actually very interesting questions coming up, which are very similar to the kind of questions that people have been asking. That I have 20 years of experience, and now I want to actually work in a startup. Where can I find these jobs? How can I do it? So some of these questions. Any advice to these people?
Okay, so I think first of all, somebody with 20 years of experience, they should not just start thinking that they can't join startup. I think this is one important myth. And while I think, as Vinay also mentioned, that there is a little apprehension that people would come with an experience and with also baggage. Okay, so I think it's very important for you also that you keep, and when we say baggage, it simply means trying to impose our earlier experience on a new setup, which becomes a baggage. So your experience should add on. Okay, so but do not even think that if you have 10 years 20 years experience you can't. Rather you should. I feel startups need the wisdom, experience, and the stability of people who have good experience. Okay, because if it's just energy, it can go into any direction. It needs a direction, and people with experience can build that. Okay, so it's very important. Now, how to do that? Now, it's a little tricky question, and there is no clear answer to it, simply because jobs in startups many times work like arranged marriages. So in arranged marriages, traditionally people just go out and look and ask their friends and families, do you know somebody good? And believe me, most of the startups do that because they want people who believe in a similar fashion, those who have the similar value systems. So they do not go very traditional. I mean, when a lot of requirements are there, obviously we have to go to the portals and all, but traditionally we would prefer referrals. Okay, so the best way to get into a startup is actually to find out people who are into the startup zone and start connecting with them. I would suggest another way, rather than thinking where the startup job would be there, what you can do is, what are the areas about which you feel very strongly about, and start to find startups which are there active around you and which you would find interesting. And I recommend start connecting with the founders themselves directly. Believe me, they would be very happy to connect and talk to you. And if the right match happens, that would be the best way, rather than looking at any random startup. Look for the products and solutions which you feel very strongly about.
Well, Sapan, thanks a lot. Actually, you have answered quite a few of these questions that I think people will have, that how you should start connecting with the ecosystem if you want to get in the ecosystem. And on that note, I know that Smriti has to actually leave. So Smriti, one last question to you before you leave. So if people have to apply to your organization, what is the best way to do that?
I feel the best way to do that is look out. I mean, keep following the startup at least. I mean, the best way to reach out is LinkedIn. It's the professional network right now. So just follow the startup you're looking out for, because they keep releasing these, hiring posts and jobs and etc. So you can always get an alert on that. Second, I think, yes, connect to the top management. If you're not finding anything suitable for you, try reaching out to the founders or the top management at least, and give a very personalized note. I guess everybody welcomes something like that. If you believe that you have something which you can contribute to this particular startup, because I remember one of my fellow founders actually from another startup, he told me that he was hiring for some role and he got a message from a lady who just actually pointed out what were the flaws in their current marketing strategy, and she put out some solutions in that particular message. And he quickly was so intrigued and he wanted to talk to her in spite of that job already being closed. So I guess it's how you approach. If your approach is really good, you can easily cut through the clutter very well. So yeah, I think that's the best way out. Keep following the startups that you like, the industry that you want to get into, and yeah, reach out to the founders and the top management.
Well, thank you, Smriti. So I do know that you had a hard stop at 4:45. So if you think that you want to move on, please, thanks a lot from our side, and we will continue our conversation with the remaining panelists.
Well, thank you
Thanks a
so
lot.
much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Smith.
So in fact, coming back to Dhruvam now. So Dhruvam, so when you started out, of course, now you have a team and you have a huge network of cabs and all. So tell us, for example, what prompted you to carry out that survey on your own in the first place? Because I think a lot of people would want to know that, as to where did this brilliant idea or that bright light bulb gets ignited, saying, oh, you know what, I must do this because there is something that is not working, number one. And the related question is, you are very clear about what you want to do. You want to become the number one customer satisfaction from a customer satisfaction point of view, not from the sheer size of business. So why that?
Okay, so the first question was about what has made me to do the survey by myself. Of course, a very simple and honest answer is financials, because the day when I left the job, I was not left with much financial available. Being into a job for 8 years, definitely we know that we just started our career, and at that point of time we do not have that much value or money available with us so that we can jump directly into a startup. So that was the only point. Of course, I did approach to multiple financial institutions on a private side as well, but I could not found any of the support, because either they were not able to believe in my concept, or not either I was having any idea or maybe any numbers to represent to them. So that was the reason, and that has made me to decide that rather than depending upon something or some another sources, why can't I do that survey by myself? Because I did my management, so there were few things which I know. I had corporate experiences, so based on that also I know that how to draft a survey forms and also. I just designed a very basic and simple surveys, and I started walking on through street, and then I started filling up the form by asking the people. Many of them, they appreciated this effort. Many of them, they criticized too. So this was the reason, why instead of waiting for the resources to come, I decided to put my first step forward. And I was not sure whether it will get converted into a successful one, but fortunately things were happening into the right direction. We got a good number of results, and when we analyzed, we found that there is a possibility for this concept to execute in the market, and if we run it well without compromising on any of the vision or any of the values or direction, we will definitely on a longer term will be at the path where we wanted to be. So this has prompted me to do it by myself, and of course it was the analysis was very important. So I was not in a position to allow any of the compromise in any of the values, because entire concept was depending on that survey. So that is the answer to the first question. Now coming to, I'm sorry, I just missed the second question. Can you please repeat it?
So why number one in customer satisfaction and not the largest, for example? So that's the choice.
Right. Now see here again, whatever we do, we believe in very startup means generally for us, it is like a solution provider where we don't focus on any of the other parameters, to be very honest. Maybe there are startups who are focusing on to much of a balance sheet, much of a valuation, or much PV on our revenue growth. But for us as a startup, what is the most important part is we wanted to give customer delight. Everyone, those who are booking a ride with us, maybe they are 10, maybe they are 100, maybe they are 1,000, or maybe they are lakhs. So it is none of our concern, but whomsoever we are serving, we wanted to deliver something best to them so that they carry certain values and memories, and they spread amongst their relatives or maybe their inner circles. So that was the core strategy why the Smart Taxi started with, and that is the core strategy even today. Why we do not spend much on marketing, we just spread it ourselves on a word of mouth. People, those who are not with us, they just internally refer us to their friends and families, and 86% of our overall business even comes through that mode even today. So that was the reason, we always kept our focus on customer center. We put ourselves, even I by myself, I keep on driving with customers even in today, despite being founder of the company, for 10 or 15 days in a month. I keep doing that. Even I just set it myself for the helpline, and I start lifting the calls and answering to customers. At least maybe 1 hour time is sufficient for me. So this gives an insight, and everything what a customer face in terms of a transacting with the company, in terms of talking to the people. So these insights are actually helping us in building or strategizing our policies and frameworks, which is more relevant and which is more centric towards the customer. And that is the reason, we have never framed anything. We don't want it to be a billion-dollar company, but yes, internally we know that if we keep focus, our customer satisfaction is the top priority. Sooner or later, definitely it will become, it will change, and it will help us in making a big company what we have a dream for. So that's the reason, rather than focusing on anything else, we focused on customer experience, and that is where we wanted to become number one by 2025. To answer your
No,
question.
thanks a lot, Bhuvam. Actually, what you talked about is very interesting, because what you talked about is, so for example, the survey and carrying out work primarily, it may have started with a necessity, but to stay close to the customer and to market realities, you have to make sure that you continue to be associated in day-to-day business opportunities. You cannot detach yourself from what is happening around you. And the second thing is maybe unwavered focus, because that's what will get you eventually more success as you go along. Well, thanks a lot. So Vinny, a question to you now. We're changing gears a bit. So what we have done so far is we have looked at, what does it take to succeed in a startup? What is it? Why do people fail? And how some models and the fact that, startup is about a lot of perseverance. But now let's look at, if you were to stack more or less the roles. So what kind of people in your kind of business get hired the most? Are they the technology people? Are they financial experts? Or are they relationship maintenance and client building people? Or any other role that you have?
Is that to me, Pancham?
Yes, Vinay.
Okay. So I think I'll be more specific. I'll try and kind of cover this from the industry point of view, and then maybe talk more about specifically about. Clearly, I think the number one job available in the startup ecosystem is the job for analytics. Okay, so if you have that skill set, I think getting a job in the startup is kind of very easy. So it's analytics is the key. I think for all organizations who are using technology as a disruptor to kind of change the way things are being done. Okay, so analytics is the new oil. Data is the new oil. I think business have to be done looking at data, nothing else. Google is a classic example. Google is not the largest advertiser in the world. Right? If you look at the advertising revenue of Google, it will be 10% of the total advertising business in the world, right? But if you look at Google isn't a technology company also. If you look at all the technology companies and compare the revenue of Google with the technology companies, of 1%, maybe 0.5%, 2%. But if you put together, Google is the most valuable company in the world. The only reason is that they have data, okay, and they can dish out products and services that you can't even imagine. So they're all working for the future. That's the reason it's a very valuable company. So data analytics is going to be the key driver for most of the companies. So data is not going to be looked at only in the piece where you're looking at business, but so let me give you an example of Faircent. Okay, so we look at analytics from all angles, right? So there's the risk which happens, the assessment of the risk which happens. There's analytics which is used. There is collection which happens. There's analytics which is used. With customer we onboard, we use analytics there. Okay, lending side, there are individual lenders who come and lend on our platform. We use analytics there. So at every function, the analytics is being used to kind of talk to each other. So analytics clearly is number one. Number two is the product guys. Okay, so they are the ones who are going to tell us how the business is going to look like in future, and how are we going to monetize that. So when I talked about the revenue models are not intact and revenue models are not chiseled out, they are the ones who kind of keep looking at that. They're the ones who kind of bring in new lines of revenue. They are the ones who keep thinking about how we can monetize. So product guys clearly, I think, has a great future in our company also in any of the startup ecosystem, right? Third, I think, is the business guys. Okay? People from sales, marketing, especially who understand internet marketing, are very important key people in these kind of startups. Because if you are looking at customers to acquire, a cheaper source of to acquire customers is through digitally, right? So that's the cheapest source, because you get customers by way of per lead, per acquisition, per click, with that kind of this thing you get. So you need people who understand that, and you can get customers. The CAC is very important in any of these startups. So it's important to kind of get business guys, and business guy requirement is pretty large, in startup, pretty large. So we have a very large requirement there, and then there are very chiseled out operational folks, right? So quality and operational folks are very, very key positions in all startups, I think, especially startups who scaled out a little. A couple of series they were picked up. I think for them, operations quality is very, very important, because we are a lean, mean organization. Our processes are not set right now. We are very, very fungible that way. People try to kind of game the system. All of that happens. So operationally, how we are working, a good guy, a bunch of guys, can manage operations and the quality. It's a great thing for the startup. I think they will be in a lot of demand. And finally, obviously, technology. Technology guys will always be required in startup. So I think that piece is, the demand for that piece is anyways been there, and there are a lot of supply also. But rest of things that I talked about, analytics, the product guys, the core business guys, and the operation guys, hard to find. As I said, it's difficult to kind of get good talent. And the interesting thing about talent is that when you're young, when you're small, people don't get attracted towards you because you know brand, nothing. And now we still have some recognition in the industry, so people at least know about us, or at least we get some good talent. 2-3 years back, we were struggling with getting good talent. Now the trouble is that when you get bad talent, and you have to make good with something to kind of run your business, right? So you kind of end up hiring some of average talent, and can run your business. And periodically you need to cut the flap. Okay. And why people say that startup is a risky affair? It's because of this. Because the teams need to kind of get reoriented all the time, and that's the reason some of them are not okay for certain roles. So the flap need to be cut periodically. But that's something that you need to kind of inculcate in before coming to the startup, because otherwise it's very difficult. Okay. So let me give you one example. So in COVID time, our supply side went weak, right? In the sense there were lenders, we have 2 lakh lenders coming out of platform, funding on our platform. So these 2 lakh people, okay, they kind of slowed down a little. Okay, so there was a team who was managing this, 10-15 member team was managing these lenders. They kind of were not, they didn't have 8 hours of job, right? And on the other side, the borrowers started to kind of slow down on paying back, right? So there was a huge gap, with respect to the EMIs coming back to us. Okay. And these lending team members, they kind of started to do collections. Okay. Now, in our organization, lending team is it's the dream job kind of. It's a supply side challenge. It's a new animal that you're creating. All of that is there. Okay. It's like the Uber creating the driver pool. Suddenly all of a sudden 2 lakh cars Similarly, we are trying to create 2 lakh people across India. We're trying to come and land on our platform. So that's a unique job. That's a storytelling job, right? Collection is an old traditional job, right? So these guys are doing that. Okay. Now that's character. Okay. Now if you make a mistake of hiring a bad talent and you get emotional about it and keep the guy, that's the biggest mistake you make. Okay. A lot of people when they start, they have a bunch of guys who kind of go with them. And if that bunch of guys are trying to kind of block your growth, you should not hesitate in asking them to go. Okay. Because one bad guy can kind of bring your organization down. It's just like kids, kids can't be left alone, with bad company, right? So it's just like that. So it's important to kind of make sure that, this is getting navigated pretty well. So, so I think, yeah. So I think clearly, I think there is huge requirement in, all startups. It's just that you look for, what you're good at, apply, and I'm absolutely sure that you'll get through.
So Vinay, what you're saying basically is that people who are very good with data analytics, they would certainly have a career in startups. Product people certainly. Technology, of course, because most of the startups now are actually being built on technology platforms. So you need people who can put that technology together. But product people are the visualizers of how the product will look like. And then you have to have people, even marketing people who are digital savvy. and then you have to have people who can keep tab of making sure the processes are running the way they are meant to be running. Right. Yeah. So all these careers, of course, exist in startup. This is for the benefit of all the audiences. Now, there is an interesting question that has come up from Sanjeev Thakkar, and that question, Sapan, I'm actually going to direct at you. And that question is there an opportunity for hire a CMO services in a startup? And especially the question, the contention is that startups actually do a lot of elevator pitches because they have to go and get some funding and so on and so forth from venture capitalists, private equity players, and so on and so forth. So will a service like this make your elevator pitch kind of a service? Can you actually create a startup around it? Number one. And number two, even if not as a company, but is there enough opportunity in startups for a role like this?
Very interesting. So, see, in startups, startups would generally try to reduce the capex and the fixed cost, and would try to take as much variable cost as possible. And for that matter, not only the marketing services, but any other services which they can sort of outsource, it would work. And if I understand the external CMO service, I understand it is something like that. The one of the biggest challenges in marketing as such a type of service, see, technology, it can be done. Okay, marketing, the biggest challenge is it is so much integrated to understanding of the product and connecting with the customer. Now, somebody being external and outside, how much you are able to really connect and be with the beliefs and values of the organization, it is something to be seen. Two type of organizations, I mean, you should look at possibly the mid-size organizations who are possibly not able to afford the full-time top management, head of the organization, head of the functions. I think those are the organizations who might want to try, but I think your proposition needs to be strong. I am I don't have a very clear answer to this part. This is very interesting, and a lot of organizations would want to do that because there is a lot of expense that happens on marketing and the success doesn't come. Now, how are you going to build the proposition? Given a choice, even I would want to look at your proposition and find out what is there for what is it that you can offer. So I would be very much interested, but believe me, I would be a bit skeptical as well. So you need to build the proposition very well, but do go for it, experiment it. It's quite interesting.
No, Sapan, thanks a lot. In fact, we have two founders and co-founders here, so we can ask them, would you, for example, pick a service like this? If somebody came and said, I will help you improve your elevator pitch.
So let me add that. So I tell you what, so if you're in retail space, retail business, right? So you're addressing large set of customers on both sides, or you're running a two-sided marketplace, just like Dhruvam and me running Fairshare. Clearly, you have to have a marketing guy yourself. Otherwise, you'll not be able to raise money. Okay? It's very clear. Okay? You need to kind of get into the thick and thin of marketing, how marketing works, right? You can't have an external guy. It's like running a tech company, not having a technology. Technology can be outsourced, right? But you can't have an outsourced tech running for you, and you're trying to raise money. Money will not come to you, right? So it's okay to kind of take these services if it is B2B business. I think B2B business can afford these kind of marketing services. But having said that, I think Sapan did mention a very interesting point. Whatever is the spend of the marketing, or what he's looking at to kind of spend, and what is kind of customers that he's wanting, the CAC we've talked about, customer acquisition cost. If you can bring that down, only then they'll bite it. Otherwise, Google is doing a fantastic job. You just have to log in and start advertising yourself. Okay, my wife does it. She's a doctor. Just look at that, right? She's a doctor. She does it herself, right? So it's not. So they made it so simple to kind of get customers going for yourself. So yeah, I think all of us sitting here in the panel, I think who's done a little bit of advertising in the startup would have done Google yourself. So that's my bit of it. So I don't know.
It's interesting insight, actually. Yeah. So basically, what you were saying that you will prefer to have an in-house marketing person
Yes.
than to maybe outsource a service like this. Dhruvam,
If you ask me, should I start this business? My answer is no.
okay, get the picture. So Dhruvam, what about you? Is the same answer as Vinay, or is it a different answer from you?
No, absolutely same answer, because being a services like this and being a marketing guy, we always need to understand your business in a very it has to flow in your nerves, so rather than hiring some external agency, because I'm sure this agency, if I'm hiring a CMO service, he is not going to exclusively deliver that services for me. I'm sure he must be associated with many other organizations, and I'm pretty sure that he will not be able to give his 100% in the entire effort what he. So again, from my side also, it's no.
Oh, interesting. So Sanjeev, I hope that you've got your answer, at least from the three panelists here. They believe that even if there is an opportunity, it is with a pinch of salt. And I think you will have to just think about what your proposition is going to be and how big can you make it, and to what extent you can demonstrate a value proposition to anybody who would be willing to consider your services. And Vinay and
Pancham, let me give you a data point, okay? So I get at least in a day, I get at least 5 to 6 LinkedIn requests for these services. I don't even read them. There are many of them floating around who are trying to give this service. They may not call it a CMO service, but all the advertising services, list of advertising services they're ready to offer. I'm sure you also would have got, for some of it for HR.
Yes, you're right.
And one piece of advice: please don't make it for adding to the elevator pitch. I mean, it will not excite the businesses. Can you really add a business value? That's the only proposition, if at all. I mean,
yeah, elevator pitches are much early. You don't have employees. Back when you're doing an elevator pitch, you're yourself, maybe your co-founder and a very tech guy. That's it.
So actually, that was my apprehension also when I read this question, because I believe that people who would want to make the elevator pitch would be the most passionate about that pitch, and therefore, and that passion has to actually be seen by the venture capitalist or a private equity player for him or her to invest the money, and therefore normally we believe that elevator pitches are done by the founders themselves to the extent possible. And most of the times it is less about being rehearsed about the pitch, but it is about how much passion you can demonstrate. And we have seen many examples of such kinds where pitches were maybe not as great, but the person was so convincing that people agreed to partner with them. On that note, well, thanks a lot, panelists. And I hope audiences today would have got a flavor of careers in startups. So one of the first things that we talked about, if you don't think you have the ability and the conviction to change something meaningful around you, don't get into a startup. If you want a lot of structure, don't get into a startup. If you can't see a task through completely, don't get into a startup. If you want to become a specialist, startups may not be your best bets. But more importantly, if you are willing to stretch and if you are willing to commit to long-term value creation for yourself and for the organization and in turn for the society, then startups are your best. But be prepared. It is not all very rosy. There are choppy weather you will encounter. There are very nice times you will encounter, but you have to be willing to endure that. And if you are not resilient, forget about a career in startups. On that note, I thank the panelists once again for your time and valuable insight, which I'm hoping that our participants would take back as actionable insights for themselves. Thank you.
Thanks, Pancham. Pleasure.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.